Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
How are you? Fine,
Okay,
huh?
thank you.
This is your first participation in this meeting, huh?
Yes.
Right. I marked you last night, no, the evening before, sitting in front of me in the question answer session,
Yes.
no?
Yes.
Please, shall we
Yes, please.
start?
Yes, a follow-on question from the guests I brought a few weeks ago. I had this, the physics PhD.
MashaAllah, most welcome.
No. Oh, these are,
Sorry,
The other friend.
the way you...
no, sorry, I pointed in. But
Right,
he was sat there in that very same
Yes,
chair.
I remember that, yes.
So, one of his questions was, he tried to be as polite as he could, but his real question didn't come out.
No?
No. You know, you talked about touchstone, inner touchstone, about, he was talking about truth. How do I know truth when I hear it?
That's right, yes.
His real, I think he talked to me later and he said the real question is, when a prophet comes, or a righteous man like Hazur, he said Hazur's a righteous man, he's, destiny from a prophet. He said, how do I know that he is saying the truth? How do I know that the Quran is the truth? How do I know, when I see a righteous person, how do I know it's the truth?
I think it was the same question which I tried to answer
Yeah.
from a different angle which he was not expecting. So perhaps he thought that I had failed to understand the question.
Yeah.
I would like him to come again.
Yeah, he's a bit reticent to come back, I must admit.
Uh,
He's not a very religious man, you see, so it's...
I could see that, but this question should be handled in his presence much better,
Right.
so that he's given a chance to correct me if he feels that I'm off the track anywhere.
Maybe a private meeting would be better than...
That's much better. It's not necessary that it should be televised. It's
Okay.
not necessary at all.
Yeah.
If possibly he could come for a cup of tea or something,
Yes, definitely.
and I would like him to open out. People who are not interested in God or in religion, it is very difficult for them to understand the answer to such questions
Yeah.
only from one angle. There's so many possibilities. I don't know which particular approach could satisfy him. And I have to probe further into him. That is the point which is very important.
I mean, a lot of what came out of the last meeting was sort of like doom and gloom, but this other question about there is Shakespeare but no one to read it,
Yes.
just sort of, sometimes thinking that if an analogy was put to me by another friend actually, he was saying that there's a river, and you come to the river and there was a bridge there. So you come to the bridge and now there is no bridge. So it's like, well, either I sit here and wait, I can't cross the river, or you can walk along the riverbank for as long as it may take to see if there is another bridge to cross the river.
Correct.
So that was the analogy is, what is the point in living a good life? What is the point in following the teachings of Islam if there's nothing at the other side anyway? And the analogy is, I think, is that if you get to the bridge and you can't cross it, that's normal life. But if you walk along the riverbank, hoping to cross the river, that is the point of...
The point again is that it's over much of generalizations and imaginary analogies which may not exist in reality.
Yeah.
First of all, an analogy has to be explained in relation to what it stands for, and it should be applied to a situation. So only then one can answer such questions. Otherwise, they're just philosophical,
Yeah.
exercises, or even just meanderings here and there. They don't mean anything. The person who conceives such questions is always trying to wriggle out of a situation where he'll have to confront the truth standing in front of him. So he philosophizes things and tries to run away. That is why it's highly important first to analyze the questioner himself, to know where he stands and what is he running from. Does he want anything across or not? Suppose the analogy is a different one. Suppose he must cross the river over anyway, and if death is the river separating him from the other world, it's irrelevant whether something is on the other side or not. One thing is sentenced, that if he doesn't find a bridge, he will be shoved into the river and will drown anyway.
Right.
You can't escape from that. So it's a matter of putting the things. I could give it a different twist, he could give it a different twist.
Yeah.
Unless we come to the hard realities and speak with reference to those realities, such analogies are just meaningless, you know. Right?
Yes, right.
So let's have a meeting with them if possible.
Yes,
again.
I know.
If not, then find someone else who's really more seriously interested, right?
I know, part of the problem.
You see, they avoid such discussions here in public because I'm afraid that they're afraid they will be exposed. If he had any solid substance to counter what I was saying, he could have there and then told me. It's not just politeness. It was I could see he couldn't put his hand onto something, and now to attempt to do it and to fail in the sight of the whole watching public, that is what is very embarrassing for a PhD of physics or whatever it is.
Yes, that's right.
So that is why he is not interested anymore. But tell him, I'm not interested in exposing anything or anybody. I'm just interested in himself. If God has given him good nature, unbiased nature, he's still amenable to me. And if possible, he can come privately. And
I mean, a question from me to you is, I have several friends like him. I mean, I went to university. There's lots of people at university
That's right, yes.
who they live their life on science, and and they think God is outside of science.
That's right.
I mean, it's very difficult to how can I get through better to them?
Everybody is different.
Yeah.
Everybody is built differently. You can't, it's not just like the British style of houses built exactly at a prototype, following a prototype, all repeat of the same thing. People are built maybe like for instance, in Spain, every house has its own individual character and individual style, and the setting is different. You go to some countries where no house resembles the other. So how can you enter every house with the same approach? Well, the approach is different. So this is the reason why we must first of all fully understand the questioner's mind, what may appeal to him. We may be striking our heads against a wall if we don't find where his door is situated.
Right.
So these things have to be taken up gradually, slowly, bit by bit, and we have to work hard on them, finding out what they stand for, what they need. And if they're not interested in anything, then you should question them, they shouldn't question you.
Yeah.
It's the other way around. Tell them, why did you come? Where have you come from? Why all these faculties? What is the purpose? Is there any design or no? Now, when you put them to questioning, then they'll find it very difficult to defend their case. So better change the size. Instead of being on the answering table,
Pose questions to them.
how?
I mean, often talking about design of
Go
life.
to the audience who put the questions, address the questions to the people sitting around the table,
Okay.
Please.
My question was, what are your feelings about the situation in Northern Ireland?
Situation in Northern Ireland. Well, that situation is reminiscent of all the past differences on religious basis, which have never been resolved because of political involvements intermingling with religious issues. Whenever the political and the religious issues intermingle, then the religious position always continues to harden, and it is never given a chance to be settled on the merit of the case itself. Religion is never discussed as such as far as the merits of respective positions in religion is concerned. The result is that the Catholics are Catholics, the Protestants are Protestants, and so on and so forth, and they feel they have a right to dictate politics on the basis of their religious belongings. Now, such issues are always insoluble because religion has no territories like geographical territories. Religious territories outspill geography and races and this and that, while political geography is very well defined and known. So it's just a futile exercise to mix these things. Somebody should stand up to them and say, look here, for God's sake, settle the issue on either political ground or religious ground. Otherwise, nothing will happen, nothing. If, a solution which is forced after the warring parties are exhausted can be imposed, of course. I mean, that can bring a sort of peace. But things will keep boiling down or boiling up later on, and such issues remain always full of dangers, and in future they sometimes work like buried bombshells. Right?
Yes, thank you.
Please. Now the introduction of this lady.
Yes, you introduce Malik.
I'm Tahir Archive. I was born in Iran, and I'm Canadian citizen. And
you were born in Iran, or
yes.
you are an Iranian?
I was born in Iran. Well, I'm Iranian, yes. Yes. But my citizenship is Canadian, right?
Perhaps you mean to say that you are an Iranian born in Iran, but you migrated later on from Iran and have shifted on to some other country, right?
Yes.
It's England.
No, Canada.
No. Which one? Canada?
Canada, yes.
Oh yes, Canada, right.
Yes. But I'm working here
Canada
right
is
now.
one of my most favorite countries of the world.
So is mine, yes.
Right. Where do you live in Canada, by the way?
In Toronto.
Toronto, proper,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Yes, please, it's welcome.
One of my question is with
Is she the
respect.
lady from Birmingham?
No, I think
No.
Legendary Malik Slims have introduced, and she has been.
There was
coming
one
here.
lady at the question answer session in Birmingham who had come from Canada and who became very interested in finding more questions, to come and meet us and ask other questions as well. But now I remember she was a sick lady, in fact,
sick lady,
yes. Please.
One of my questions is about Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, with respect to him. I read in a book that he first of all, he had tutors he had a human teacher, and few teachers to learn Persian, Urdu, Arabic, logic, everything. My understanding was that a prophet should have innate knowledge and should not have, as a teacher himself, he should not have
Learned anything from anybody?
Yes, because it's a God-given to him anyways, he should not have. So, what is the explanation?
Of course, I understand the question. Now, the premise has no foundation, that no prophet of God should be able to read or write. This promise is proved to be absolutely wrong by the Holy Quran itself, because the only prophet who is referred to as Ummi is Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. None other, to my knowledge, is mentioned as Ummi either in the Quran or in any divine book. So this is not the right premise at all. Why to call every other prophet Ummi if this is the title, and a special title, distinctive title, of only Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That is, if you apply this term Ummi to the literal sense as well as to other senses. But let's first analyze the word Ummi and then see whether it is in any way applicable to other prophets or not. The fact is that as far as the religious knowledge and the real underlying meaning of religious teachings is concerned, no prophet is taught that by any human being. So if that is what you have in mind, then I fully agree with the premise that no prophet is taught what he is going to teach to the world in the name of God by any human being. So if it is proved that Hazrat Mirza Sahib was taught what he taught to the world in the name of God by some village teacher in his childhood, then his case is dropped, finished. Don't take any more interest. What he was taught, he rose to speak against that traditional knowledge handed over to him by the ordinary mullahs. So that is what he was taught by God later on. He himself, for a long time, until God had himself corrected him, believed in the life of Jesus Christ, uninterrupted, continuous for the last 2000, or at his time, last 1900 years or so. And he never noticed some verses of the Quran which positively declared him to be dead, declared him to have met his natural death, I mean. Now, when it was revealed to him by Allah that Jesus is no longer alive, and God revealed to him, pointing to the verses of the Quran, when he reread the Quran, immediately a complete new understanding was born. This was never taught to him by a human teacher. Then read his commentary of the Quran. Wherever he comments on the verses of the Holy Quran, and then you re-examine the reports that he was taught by small village teachers, the Holy Quran. Can you ever imagine that these interpretations were taught to him during his childhood by a small ordinary village mullah? What he was taught was how to read and write the Quran and the traditional some teachings. He never went to school anyway. Like some ulama are brought and elders are invited to help teaching the babies in the Muslim houses, reading and writing of the Quran, and then for further study, if they're interested, some comparatively bigger scholars employed by wealthy families. Now working back to that position, can you ever imagine that a man or a family member, the family member should realize this is going to be a prophet and he should not be taught? Even these ordinary ways. So this is a premise which has no legs to stand upon. There's absolutely no foundation. And when you do understand the meaning of who is taught by God and in how he is taught by God, then the things become very clear. Thank you.
Another question I've got that was posed by... we visited the Ahmadi graveyard in Brookwood, and someone said, well, what is this white line here? Who defines...
That's right.
Apparently this is, anyone who's a righteous person or gives 10% of them a musi or something like that, they get, it's the automatic highway to heaven. Or, I didn't say, basically that's the way
That's why you invite trouble,
Yeah, I invite trouble by spiders.
No one can get an automatic hallway to heaven or anywhere else.
Right.
The issue is always decided by God.
Right.
And He is the sole decision maker. Only we hope and pray for some people who have offered greater sacrifice, distinctively greater than the ordinary run of the people, that they would especially receive Allah's favors. It's a wish, it's a prayer, and no more.
All right, it's my misunderstanding.
That's right.
So thank you.
Me?
Yes.
Another question is that again, is my understanding of religion is that there's going to be two manifestations.
Translations?
Two manifestations.
Processions, right?
Yes. Who are coming, like return of John the Baptist and return of the Christ, or return of Qa'im and Rij'at Husayni, both of them. As far as Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is concerned, first of all, I want to know if beside Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, anybody else came to prepare people for his coming, like, or he was the only one, and he was the John the Baptist or the Christ.
You see, when you get too much hooked onto these conventional concepts of the one who precedes and one who follows and all that, that would never permit you to journey freely in the direction of God, because these are in fact inherent congenital problems of any society. They live by the twisted concept of religious jargon, not the religious jargon, but the twisted concept of religious jargon, which they have inherited generation after generation, and they want to reach the truth always through the same meandering path of very problematic understandings of religion on the part of their forefathers. They conceive an idea which seems to be good and attractive to them, but it may have some twists, may have some problems, difficulties, which they never confront as such, and pass the idea on to the second generation, and it goes on adding until the result that whenever a prophet of Allah, a messenger of God, does come, this, the difficulties or the obstructions created for him to be accepted by the people normally are so many, which are inherited by generation, that whenever they start traveling back through the path carved by their elders, the path to lead to the truth, they find that it's impossible to travel along that path and reach anywhere, in fact. Now, this is a generalization, but now I'll particularize it and explain the whole thing to you. Then you will understand the hazards of the journey you are attempting to undertake. See, each prophet, when he comes, he has been prophesied, his advent has been foretold, and the matter seems to be as simple as that. Like the Holy Quran says, you find the name of Muhammad mentioned in the Holy Bible, in the Old Testament, and his name Ahmad mentioned in the New Testament. So it's a simple open and shut case. Why don't you accept him? But the generation who is addressed, they have already twisted the word Muhammad in a different way, the word Ahmad in a different way. And it is not a simple case for them at all to understand like this. They challenge this. They say, no, we don't find it mentioned in the Bible at all. Whatever is mentioned has already been fulfilled in the case of that prophet and that prophet and that prophet, and the case is closed, finished. So your inherited understandings of the prophecies are very dangerous to follow. Go back to the case of Jesus Christ. There, the example of Jesus Christ will perhaps more perfectly fit the question that you have raised. It was said that Jesus would come and he would be preceded by somebody who would prepare the world for accepting Jesus. His name would be Elijah or Elijah. He was a prophet of God who is mentioned in the Old Testament as having ascended to heaven, sitting on a fiery chariot and rising before a companion of his saw him rising and disappear. It is said that he would descend again. It was said that he would descend just before the time of Christ. When Christ will be about to appear, it will be only then he would return back sitting on the same chariot and warn the world that the time of the Christ is near. Open up the locks of your hearts and doors of your hearts and so on. Now this was the reigning concept at the time of Jesus Christ, but taken literally. Then there were prophecies about Jesus Christ that he would come with a crown over his head. He would liberate the children of Israel from the foreign yoke or any yoke. This was taken literally. When Jesus came, nobody had seen Elijah sitting on a chariot descending from heaven. When Jesus came, nobody saw him with a crown over his head, giving a call for war of liberation against the Roman Empire. It was a very different Jesus who did come in person, a completely unrecognizable Jesus if they went by what they had heard from their forefathers. So first you have to rectify the inherited expectations of the promised reformer. Go back and examine them critically and see, were your forefathers right in preparing you with these and those conditions for the acceptance of the newcomer, or will they obstruct the passage of any divine reformer, whoever comes and whenever he comes, if judged by the criterion which has been handed down to you? Now the history of religion is unanimous on this. Every time a prophet was refused, and every time he was refused by the majority of the people, it was because of the twisted expectations. So why go by any twisted expectations at all? Why not go by the unanimous verdict of the history of the prophets as they appear? Now, you can expect a prophet to descend from heaven or to appear from the dead or appear from a cave somewhere, but if you study the history of prophethood, you will never find this happen anywhere in the world. So there are two things. One is expectations, as you mentioned. The other is the reality of prophethood. The reality of prophethood has a commonality, unbroken, without exception whatsoever. They all appear like ordinary human beings, born out of humble mothers. They do not make any tall claims. They live like ordinary children. The only thing common about them is that during their childhood, during their youth, they have never been alleged to have spoken lies or indulged in frivolous life. That is the law, which is a sound law, there is no question of any misinterpretation of this. Now, why don't you apply the same criterion to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, which is proven by the entire history of prophethood, instead of seeking things other than those? Why don't you study the Holy Quran in relation to the evidence produced by the Holy Quran in favor of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? There you will find no bizarre phenomenon, no strange miracles supporting his case. It is exactly the same thing which I am mentioning you will find in the Holy Quran and nothing else. So that which stands for the master should stand also for the servant. And Imam Mahdi should be judged on the same criterion as his master, the holy founder of Islam, was judged. not by the people whom he addressed, but by the Quran itself. The Quranic argument is universal there. It is not specific. One thing I mentioned, the past of all the claimants who claim to be from God has to be clean. Otherwise, the doubts would appear. A man who is known to have told lies, is known to have indulged in irresponsible behavior here and there, known to have usurped people of their rights and things, how can we one day say that I have now reformed very well and now you should take my claim seriously that God has selected me? His past should be spotless and his future should be pocked with allegations. These are the two things, and the dividing line is only his claim that he has come from God. Psychologically, it's impossible to believe that a man with a complete clean past, when he claims that he is from God, suddenly he becomes the worst man on earth. All the worst allegations are, directed against him, and he is targeted with such bombardment of things, filthy things, that, as I said, his face appears to be pocked like no pocked face was ever witnessed by man. This is the criterion which has been presented by the Holy Quran. It says, قَدْ لَبِثْتُ فِيكُمْ عُمَرًا مِّن قَبْلِهِ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. O who want to judge the truth of my claim, why don't you see my clean past? Why don't you observe that? I have lived among you a long life, and you know what I am, what I have been. Wherever did you find a fault with me as far as the basic human morals are concerned, accepted human values are concerned? If not, why don't you, use your reason and be wise to, behave wisely, afala taqilun. So these are the criterions which stand above censure. You can always trust them. They will never fail you. So instead of what you have heard about the prophets, how they come, whether they have bones or not, they show miracles of this sort or that sort, why don't we just remain limited to the criteria of truth offered by presented by the Holy Quran in favor of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And those criteria are supported throughout the history by the history of all the prophets. So this is why when miracles were demanded, the Holy Quran said no. And the Western scholars fail to understand the significance of that. Because they said the Holy Quran says Jesus Christ showed these miracles, Moses showed that miracles, such miracles. So why don't you produce those miracles? The Holy Quran does not lay any store by miracles in the sense that they never convince people whenever fulfilled. You see, the Holy Quran says that وَمَا يُشْرِكُمْ أَنَّهَا إِذَا جَاءَتْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ قُلْ إِنَّمَا الْآيَاتُ عِندَ اللَّهِ. They demand from you, this was the demand of the non-believers from Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, exactly in the same words as the same demand is addressed to Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. Exactly. The ulama here will tell you, ask them for one single miracle which he showed. Just one. And we will reconsider our position. This exactly was what was demanded from Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah. The Holy Quran mentions it. Listen, they claim and they swear by God. What the verse? I remember it, but just immediately,
Get it right.
Yes, it says that وَأَقْسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَهْدَ وَأَقْسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَهْدَ أَيْمَانِهِمْ لَإِنْ جَاءَتْهُمْ آيَةٌ لَيُؤْمِنُنَّ بِهَا. They swear by God with the strongest swearing one can make, that even if this prophet brings a single sign from Allah, just one, لَيُؤْمِنُنَّ بِهَا, they will not demand from more. They will most certainly believe in him. Exactly the same thing is shouted at the top of the voices of the mullahs all over the world regarding Hazrat Masih Maud al-Islam. The answer is this: قُلْ إِنَّمَا الْآيَاتُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Tell them that there are many signs with Allah, no shortage of signs. وَمَا يُشْرِكُمْ. But how can we make you understand? لَإِنْ جَاءَتْهُمْ أَنَّهَا إِذَا جَاءَتْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Whenever these signs will come, they will not believe. Because in the past, exactly the same thing happened. Who believed in Jesus by seeing signs? Who believed in Moses after seeing signs? None. So these signs are just sort of academic exercises. They do not mean anything as far as the judgment of truth of a prophet is concerned. The criteria presented by the Holy Quran with reference to the unanimous religious history is the only worthy criteria to judge the claimant regarding his truth. And this is one of the signs I have told you. The Holy Quran doesn't present, you see, he is doing the same thing as Moses did, he is doing that thing as Jesus did. He says, no, just see to it. Come to your senses. This man has lived you as a child, grown into adulthood, until he reached the age of maturity of 40 years, when the age of passion begins to dwindle down. Did you find him ever committing a crime against humanity, against human moral values? Ever telling lies? If yes, show us one evidence. Bring one evidence that you really alleged him to do that, to have done it. A clean slate, absolutely. Now one night when he tells you that he has been appointed by God, suddenly you find fault in everything he says. So your own testimony stands against the future allegations. This is the beautiful point raised by the Quran. What a powerful argument, absolutely indestructible. The 40 years of your witnessing is sufficient evidence of your falsehood and his truth. Because now when you say you are prejudiced, and with colored eyeglasses you can't see anything rightly. When you are beginning, you have begun to say him or criticize him, it is in the light of your denial first and examination later. So this is one of the arguments in favor of Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ. He lived a life of 40 years and beyond, in the presence of the entire Muslim community of India at least. And when he claimed, till that moment, all the ulama who knew him personally stood witness to the fact that he has been such a pious, holy man, dedicated entirely to the cause of Islam and God and humanity, that one of them said, if you have another like him, show us from the history of Islam. That was Muhammad Hussain Batalvi, who led the movement of hostility against him later on. But a day before this happened, this is what he was saying. So these are the real solid rational things by which you should go. And on this issue I have spoken so many times in various question and answer sessions. All the arguments which I have presented in favor of Masih Maud al-Islam, founded on the Quranic statements, founded on the history of religion, must be given weight and must be preferred. If somebody is proved to be right from that, approach, from that angle of examining his truth, then all the rest is meaningless. The rest is just small things, because they fall to the category of the similar objections and pinprickings and other things with relation to all the prophets of the world. Nobody spares them. Right? Thank you.
I have another quick question from...
Yes.
Quick,
take your time.
No, take my time.
Yes, please.
A friend of ours is a Catholic person, and I was showing them the Ahmadiyya diary, and she was looking through the list. She was saying prayer, okay, I agree with prayer. Fasting, I can see the logic in it. She got down to the list of predestination,
yes.
And that was the one that sort of stuck in her throat, saying, well, if it's predestination, what is the point of the above? If everything's predestined, then,
But what is predestination?
She was like fate, predestination. That's what she was
What
looking
he
at.
understand of predestination?
I suppose they were thinking that your life's pretty much mapped out.
But that has delivered me, and that question has told me something of which I was not aware before. I thought you come regularly to our question and answer sessions, and you also attend Jummahs and listen to my various sermons on various fundamental issues, where issue of destiny has been dealt with by me.
Right.
At such length, in such depth, that after that you are telling me that you couldn't answer him.
Well, I answered.
It's amazing.
I try my best.
Huh?
I try my best.
But if you had tried your best, it would have been impossible for you to feel, sort of defenseless in this. I assure you one thing. The issue of predestination is what first must be decided. He is born in a certain circumstances, to a certain family, in a certain country, with some congenital advantages, some congenital disadvantages. Can he change anything of this? So this is destiny.
That's his destiny. The rest is
one form of destiny. This is form of predestiny. Predestined things. And there are certain things which are interrelated, where destiny and human effort are intertwined. There too, it is in the knowledge of God that in the final analysis somebody would help his destiny to be destroyed and help his destiny to be, to be good for him. And it is not his pre-knowledge which determines the issue of the outcome. It is his free choice which determines the issue of the final outcome. But because God has pre-knowledge of what is to come, so the knowledge of what he would do does not change, because that knowledge is dependent on the action of somebody else. Now, this is the most difficult part which people fail to understand, which I have been trying to make them understand through many examples. But to me, it is the simplest case. There is no problem at all. Now, what you did this morning, do you know?
I remember what I did.
Oh, yes, tell me.
Well, got up, read my prayers, went back to bed,
Yes.
had some breakfast.
Yes.
The teacher came round, played with my son, my brother-in-law
that's
came
right.
round, blah, blah, blah.
Now, you know that.
I remember that.
Can you change it?
No.
None of it. Is it because you know it? This is why it's unchangeable?
Even if I'd slept through and couldn't remember it, I still couldn't change it.
That's it. So the knowledge has nothing to do with unchangeability of your past. Your knowledge, but your knowledge is unchangeable as well, because the facts are unchangeable. So what precedes, the facts or the knowledge? The facts. So in relation to the future, God has the pre-knowledge exactly in the same relationship. He has the knowledge of a thing because it would happen like that. Otherwise, he would not have that knowledge, because that knowledge would be false if it hadn't happened like that. See?
Yes.
This is predestiny.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the forms. There's so much more to it.
No, I understand.
Okay. Yeah?
Thank you.
Please.
When you're asleep,
Yes.
how does God present messages to you?
You see, the human psyche is fully provided with all the possibilities and all the eventualities which a man may confront. But the ultimate reason why we have been provided with this intricate phenomenon within ourselves is to bring us in communion with God. Right? Now, if you have a radio set, there has to be some purpose to receive a certain program broadcast from a certain radio station. The more powerful the radio set is, the more clear the message would be. But a radio set without a remitting station is nothing. It's completely meaningless. Unless it goes haywire and starts, building its own messages and things by internal pulses and vibrations. This is exactly the case of human psyche, human mind. Human mind is fully equipped with all the recipient system of prophecy or communion from God. If it were not, God will not be able to commune with you. He transmits and you must receive. So the receiving set is provided to every human being, whether it is of high quality or low quality, it varies from person to person, but it is provided. Now, if there is no message from God, can this system be activated otherwise by other factors or not? This is the second question which should be answered. To my knowledge, yes. This system can be activated through human power, through the power of human mind as well. This we have observed in mesmerism. This we have observed in the case of Pharaoh's magician, working on the minds of Moses and other people and making them imagine that they are snakes and not ropes or strings. And according to Allah, this was their magic by which they bound the sights of the people. They didn't turn the ropes into snakes at all. So the power of mind working upon other minds is a proof of proof of the truth of what I'm telling you. We have that system within us which can be activated, and one can receive messages from outside by other human agencies. If so, why can't we receive messages from Allah? That's one thing. The second is, if there are no outside messages delivered, we can receive the messages from within ourselves. And there's an internal activation of the system. That is the world of dreams. All that we think, all that we feel, our aspirations, our hopelessness, our disgust with things and so on and so forth, disappointments, fears, all continue to get buried below and below, layer after layer in our subconscious mind. And whenever some stirring event takes place, which excites some layer of our buried knowledge and memory, they are stirred to action and rise to a higher level, like in atomic molecular phenomenon. Whenever the electrons of a lower orbit are excited, they change their orbit and go to higher until they reach the highest, and then they become visible, then they become active. not otherwise. Otherwise, you don't take notice of them. So similarly, human ideas are in latent, dormant stage, form, buried under the layers upon layers of other subsequent incidents and their memories. But when there is some exciter, a factor which excites things, then they begin to rise to the surface and they reach the surface of dreams. Then the dreams are not fully organized. Sometimes they are not organized at all. But the strange behaviors, strange phenomenon, haphazard jumbling of things together. You sometimes begin to fly, sometimes you are afraid, sometimes you run away from somebody or something and you can't. And all those dreams are rather hazy and disjointed and things. These are not divine dreams, because the divine dreams would have a message. Like a human message, when it is delivered to the same psyche, although a weak message, yet it is organized. So whenever you work your mind with somebody, you have a very specific message to deliver, and if you are powerful enough, you succeed in delivering that message. Like as I've told you the example of Moses and the Pharaoh's magicians. But when a message comes from God, he sees to it that there are no interferences. The message is delivered. And if there are interferences, God sees to it that they are removed later on, and the message is finally settles down as a pure message from God. Now, it has its own internal signs, which can be read by those who know the art of interpretation of dreams. That is what reminds us of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam. The way he interpreted the dream of the king of Egypt of that period, while all others had failed and they said it is just a psychic process, that is what they said. Al-Ghaful Ahlam. Their dreams which are just disturbance of stomach and this and that, some psychic disorder has made you see this dream. But Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam knew the art because he had learned it from God himself. He immediately saw what was in it. And the subsequent years proved, the events as they were unfolded later on, for 8 years continuously, that he was right, 100% right. So this is a sure sign of a dream from God, that not only it is readable because of its internal organization and logic and coherence, but also because the future events support the true interpretation of such dreams. So they could not have been messages from human minds, because human mind has no knowledge of the future and has no command over events like the rains, the dry seasons and this and that. So this is how you should read dreams, and if you can't analyze your own dreams, you can always write to me. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
As you said, there are lots of signs and pre-told messages that's about the coming of Christ. I personally have seen so many signs about other people who could have been Messiah, and I've seen signs, but I don't believe in that part at all, like falling of the stars and eclipse of moon and sun. These are not good enough for me. I think a religion who is from God has to have some fruits. Fruits that fulfill the needs of this time.
Absolutely right.
Unity of mankind, peace, elimination of all the prejudice, universal language, something that people come in the same umbrella, no matter what they believe in. Still, they have to work for certain things, and the religion that is true, first of all, I believe that it will, whether somebody wants to stop it or not, it will, first of all, will scatter very diversely through Chinese, Indians, Americans, doesn't matter. First of all, the religion of God would be very diverse. And second, I believe that the fruit has to be there, and not fashionable like drinking and things like that, but things that is really needed for this time, for the problems of the world, economically, environmentally, all kinds of problems.
See, your question is again spread out in so many areas. We have to collect it together and read through it first. This concept, as she's presenting, reminds me of the Baha'i image of the golden age, when a prophet comes addressing every people in a language with which they have been addressed before and they understand, and working a commonality between people on the basis of the minimal compulsions and the maximum freedom. And again, to introduce a language which should be the universal language of the world, they should understand all of it. Now, turning back to the religious history as quoted by the Quran, is there any evidence of the same from the history of prophets? None whatsoever. The point is, on the one hand, you support the Quran as a divine book and support all the divine scriptures up to that period, and suddenly you begin to completely revolutionize the image which has been created by the study of the divine scriptures and the divine history of people before, and bring a new idea altogether. Where is the substance in it? Why should God have gone about reforming things in a way which, according to the new idea, was an utter failure and which had no substance and no meaning? This is what should have been done. That's one thing. The second, how can it be done anyway? If somebody claims to be that prophet, what would be the criterion for judging him first? Or will anybody listen to his advice of having a universal language and this and that, and taking away certain restrictions and easing the tension of religion by saying, all right, you forget about this, forget about that, let's turn to a comparatively easier, more comfortable religious course which could be commonly exercised by all the people of the world. When you say that, where you gain your authority from? And do you not at the same time condemn all the previous attempts of God to devise a strict course for reformation? When you ignore the injunctions of God, then you suffer. Now this concept and the whole idea reminds one of St. Paul. The working of the mind is very similar to that. When he looked back at the whole issue of evil and sin and redemption and emancipation, he finally came out with a brilliant idea of his own. He said, his analysis in itself bore some weight, but within a limited sphere of argumentation. He said, if sin is defiance of the word of God and the law, then do away with law. There will be no sin left. Remove one pole and the opposite pole also falls. So doing away with the law, whether altogether or in part, is in fact acceptance of defeat by God. that whenever attempts were made to reform the society through legislation by God, the whole history of mankind stands witness to it that God failed in doing it. So He's accepted the easier way. All right, I remove the law and do whatever you please, but remember, behave, moderately. This is no answer. What is law? What is sin? First, unless we understand these things, we cannot create a criterion, universal criterion for the acceptance of a claimant or rejection of a claimant. But because I think the time is over, only 1 minute is left. So far I have only dealt with the question from the point of view of the similar questions raised by others, particularly, as I've said, by Baha'is themselves. So might be because she is an Iranian origin, she might have heard of these things from her friends, but I assure you there is no substance in that whatsoever. The reality is that religion is based not on this progressive changes in human way of life. A true religion is always based on human psyche and the requirements of human psyche, which are unchangeable. Sin can only be defined with reference to psychic factors, and deliverance can only be defined with reference again to the psychic factors. All the rest is hocus pocus, just meaningless. If a religion has to be evolved according to the change in times, then from the time of Islam up to now there should have been revealed so many religions in the world. Because every decade or so we saw changes. And from the time of Baha'u'llah up to now, there should be quite a few religions introduced by this time. Because in his case the change was so rapid that from the time of Bab and the time of Baha'u'llah, there is such a small difference that the entire law was annulled and the completely new teaching was granted because the time was changed. If the time changes so rapidly and at the end of the human progress, time does accelerate, I assure you. It changes very rapidly. Then if you go by the time and relate the divine teaching to the changing atmosphere of human conditions and environments and scientific progress, etc., every other year there has to be a new prophet bringing a new law, at least, if not twice a year. The only thing which is unchangeable is human psyche. That is why the Holy Quran lays stress on this. It says that each boy is born, each human is born on the fitrat of Allah, and fitrat of Allah is unchangeable. So judge the religions according to their teachings, whether they apply to human psyche or not. And if the Quranic claim is true, that the Quran is based on psyche, then as long as the psyche does not change, there can't be any other book which should replace the Quran. But this is a general answer. If you want any specific questions, you are welcome to come again, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right?
Jazakumullah.
Thank you.